Um, Hello. I
Hello.
want to just welcome you, Deborah Davis, to this conversation with a focus on education. And you have been homeschooling your beautiful children for quite a while.
Yeah.
So I have a couple of questions, and you have the questions too. And I'm just going to walk through them with you.
Okay, thank
So,
you.
what were the key factors in your decision to homeschool your children?
So it began when Juliet, my now 17-year-old, was in first grade,
Mhm.
and she had a wonderful kindergarten experience at a Waldorf charter school. So it was public.
Mhm.
And we loved it there. In first grade, her teacher had been teaching older children, and she just started teaching first grade because they go through all the grades and then come back around.
Oh,
So the way that she interacted with the first graders felt to me more like she was talking to eighth graders. And I
mhm.
had multiple meetings with faculty and her, and that was the number one reason. I didn't want her to continue with teachers who are going to treat her that way, and other kids, not just her. The second was exposure to information and news from other kids that was not in my value system. And then the other was just the peer interactions, that the type of interacting with kids, which some people are fine with, was not my preference. So for all those reasons, I decided that starting in second grade on, she's homeschooled. And then Amelia, who's now 13, she has homeschooled the entire time.
And so was it just, of course, that Amelia would enter into that because Juliet was in it, in homeschooling?
Right, because at that time, Amelia was, let's see, she wasn't even in kindergarten yet.
Mhm.
And I also had many kids, friends whose kids had been homeschooling from the very beginning. So I had all that information. I saw that they were all doing wonderfully, and it was pretty easy for me to make the transition because I had so many resources. And so I think we contemplated, does Amelia want to go to the Waldorf kindergarten, and probably asked her, but Matt, my husband, and I talked about it, and we thought no, she loved being with her sister and all the
Yeah.
community we had. So yeah.
So from your experience, what have been the drawbacks on you or your children from a homeschooled education? So,
Yeah, for me personally and my kids, okay, I'll just speak for myself. I don't think there have been any for myself or on my kids. I can see some choices I've made, some people may think that it was a drawback. Like I slowed my career down a lot. My career could have built up a lot faster, and I could have been working more. But for me, as soon as my children were born, I slowed my work down a lot and focused mainly on being a mother and parenting. I didn't quit working, but I worked very small amounts of time. So that wasn't a drawback for me, but some people it could be. And then for some people, less interaction with the children with their peers on a daily basis.
mhm.
But I think there's two things. One, if you're in right now, it's different, but back then, and besides the pandemic right now, there are hundreds of, dozens of homeschool groups out there. So you actually can have your kids be with other homeschoolers every single day if you want to.
Huh.
So that is a myth that they're not going to have social interaction with their peers. for me, we were involved in groups, so they did have interactions with their peers, but it's not like you can just drop them off at school and then they're with their peers. You go with them or arrange groups or go on field trips. So it's more work, but the payoff is totally worth it.
So the drawbacks for you and for your kids seem minimal, if existent at all. And the only ones you could give me is what you think others might have projected on you.
Exactly. Yeah. And I've asked my kids and they really can't think of any drawbacks either. Except like that, not being able to see their friends every day. But part of that is because, choices that we've made about what kinds of school they want to do. But they did have a lot more interaction with their friends when they were younger.
And tell me about the greatest benefits for your children's educational development.
Okay.
This is the heart of it.
There are so many.
Okay.
So I think, when they were younger, we did have a Waldorf philosophy for our home. So we didn't do media. We did a lot of natural toys and cooking and like cleaning, in a fun way, and little toy sweepers for the kids and stuff. So I feel like before second, third grade, it's all about play and relationships. And, so we got all that was school for us, school, cooking, baking, going to the grocery store when they could write, learning how to make lists and, just having fun. So there was a lot more time for that type of development, our relationship, their relationship with each other. Then now as they've gotten older, they each play 2 instruments. They've been able to do so many of their own activities that they're interested in. They both have areas where they're activists and they, they follow their passions. They said they like that they get to eat whenever they want. So they get lunchtime when they're hungry, not when it's the school's decision. They get to, Juliet is a high schooler, so she likes to listen to music while she does her schoolwork. There's more time for them to do advanced things, like if they want to read books that are, college level, or just, art, so many areas where they wouldn't have time to do it if they were in public school. And they can, so like this morning, Amelia was looking up how orcas are rescued, just for the fun of it. And so being able to learn what they want when they want.
It is not on my list, but the level of anxiety in kids, I mean, this is pre-COVID, okay? Pre-pandemic. The level of anxiety about worry and getting it all done, and a certain amount of that is just the pressure to complete things, which we learn to do and feel successful about. And then, so that's the satisfaction of completion, which all of us need to do. And there is some angst with that. So how would you say your kids and the children who've been homeschooled have managed with the that anxiety that is so prevalent with our youth?
I think it makes such a huge difference and such a benefit, especially, parents choose where their kids are going to go to school for the most part, but some kids also choose, they want to be in like the that intense curriculum,
IB,
the public schools. Yeah, IB. So those kids, and kids especially at private schools, which I've seen in my practice, my psychotherapy practice, there is so much pressure. And then we read about it in the news, all the scary consequences. So I think, for homeschoolers, they get to pick their path. It also depends on, their family's values. So Juliet is planning on going to a university. And so even though we don't put pressure on her, I know she does feel pressure because she wants to go to, certain schools. But up until I would say junior year, there was not any pressure, or very little, besides what you're talking about. We're finishing, an assignment or an test. And that's once you got to high school. Before that, it's very free flowing. They get to go on their own time frame.
Mm.
There isn't the competitiveness because there's no grades. You don't unless you want to, but we didn't do grades before high school because there's no need. The college doesn't look at that. So that's another huge benefit.
That is, with the pandemic and distance learning and children and their families getting, having a hard time learning to sit, face the screen, fatigue, attentiveness, all of that. To these families with school-age children are facing the reality of extended distance learning, which has its obvious concerns about attention, retention, and diminishment of social interaction. How do these concerns of today's brick and mortar distant education children line up with your concerns for reaching educational goals? In other words, that was a big question. Families are trying to figure out what to do. Mm-hmm. And here they are, midway in some of their cases, right? What's your thought?
Well, I kind of thought about it in terms of the different concerns you broke down.
Yeah.
So for long term, and I guess in terms of the pandemic, I don't feel like there are long-term concerns. Even if it's the whole school year, if a kid, I guess high school is different because, they need to plan if they want to go to college. But besides high school, if they took a whole year off and just read and played, there's nothing wrong with that. We don't, like, I was thinking about for myself, I cannot remember any math I did. I took statistics in college and graduate school. I have 2 master's degrees, and I can barely do like 3rd or 4th grade math that my kids do. So you learn what you need to for your career. My husband, he was an engineer, so he can do calculus like it's, the ABCs. Mm-hmm. So a year off, even if they're just reading, and there is no need, in my opinion, to sit in front of a screen and learn. And so retention doesn't seem like an issue to me because, it's not crucial.
Okay.
Then in terms of, if they want to transition or supplement, there are many stores around town where you can buy workbooks or other things. And there's also more fun interaction type of media learning, like Khan Academy. And there are many resources where, I don't know what the teachers are going to do. I know it's difficult for the teachers and the students and the parents. So, there is the option to transition to homeschool. And there are ways where you don't have to have them sit in front of a screen.
I just think about the ones that are where the parents there's a single parent, or their career is truly demanding. Do you have any thoughts about that, or cooperative kind of do you know anybody, are you familiar with any programs where there's a collective where you would teach one day and another would, do you know anything about that?
Well, there were a lot of those, but those were in person. And so with COVID, I'm not sure, those, like, there are homeschool groups, and we would do like an experiential lesson, or like do art one day or do science one day. And there are classes. So A Brighter Child is one of them. Mm-hmm. And they are going to be doing experiential classes online.
Uh-huh.
But even all the homeschool vendors are probably doing things virtually because, it's a state, well, I guess it's county regulations. Lakeshore Learning and Rudolph Steiner are other resources.
Okay.
But for parents who are single parents, I mean, that's really challenging. I do have clients who have young children, they're working full time, and they're lucky that they have a grandma, a parent grandma who can watch the toddler. Or, I know friends in the homeschool community whose kids have special needs.
Mm.
But again, they're two-parent families and one income. So usually the mom is taking care of their 5 kids and, the special needs. So it is a real challenge. I don't necessarily have any brilliant ideas for people that have to work full time and figure out what to do with their kids.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a very difficult situation. And in terms of like, if it's going to be distance learning, I guess the only thing I can think of is to take the pressure off themselves, that if they, turn on the screen and their kids are not learning that much, to not be so worried about it. Because, this again is my opinion, but if they color while they're watching it, or they're not even paying attention, but that's what they have to do for a year, their children are going to be fine.
Okay.
I don't have recommendations for them necessarily.
Right.
But some of the charters might have in person, but I don't know at this point.
How would you complete the following sentence? If only I had known blank about homeschooling, I would have.
I think probably if I had known, one, that I didn't have to be a teacher myself and I didn't have to have the patience of a saint, I would have done it earlier.
Wait a minute. I thought you were the teacher.
I am and I'm not. I don't have to be.
Facilitator?
I'm a facilitator. And I think in terms of like I don't have to be I don't have to be educated as a teacher. Like I don't need a teaching credential, which I already knew that, but I was thinking, well, I'm not a teacher. How am I going to teach my kids? But there are so many resources that I, read the book and learn it with them until they get past my grade level. And then there's resources. So
there's resources.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious about funding for homeschooling.
Yes, there is funding. Yes. They're trying to.
Who's they?
The government, the state of California government. Yeah. Trying to pass a bill that would take away funding for charter schools. And I'm not sure on the details of it, but it's basically right now what's happening is instead of funding the schools for how many students there are this year, they're funding for how many students there were last year. But a whole bunch of students have already started enrolling, so that decreases the amount of money the schools have.
When you say charter, does charter equal homeschool?
No, you can homeschool through a charter. So some of them are Visions, South Sutter Charter School, Horizon Charter School, Inspire, and Natomas. Those are all charter schools that are homeschools. But then you can also file a private affidavit through the state. And that, in that scenario, you don't get any funding, I don't believe. That's just your kind of your own homeschool. But the other ones, you get a certain amount of money per student. So you can spend that on the books, art supplies. Before COVID, gymnastics classes, music lessons. You just have to find a vendor, and there's thousands of them.
What can I ask? What program you went through?
We have been with South Sutter Charter School.
Okay.
The whole time. And
okay.
We really like them.
That's kind of important to know that if you go with a program that's already established, the benefits for a full rounded curricular experience is possible. So is there anything else you'd like to tell us about homeschooling, or are we good?
Well, the only thing is that the other benefit is that there are a lot of resources that are free through the homeschool charter. So you have an educational specialist, or they're called something else with different charter schools, but they'll meet with you now online. It used to be in person, and give you recommendations if you want, or take samples of your kids' work to file, for, I guess, legal purposes. And then they have a bunch of things online. So there are a lot of benefits of going through the charter school. And then I Googled it, and there's tons of resources online.
Good.
All kinds of stores and schools and information on how to go about it. And then also I would recommend, if you can, find people who homeschool so you can ask them questions, because that was really the most helpful for me, is asking one of my friends to kind of guide me through the process.
Thank you. So on that note, if anyone contacts me saying they would really like to learn more, can I let them speak with you?
Yeah, you can give them my phone number or email.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you,
And
Rabbi Nancy.
love to your family, and it was a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay.